And welcome to tonight's Tacoma Narrows Bridge webinar. My name is Noah Crocker, and I am staff to the Transportation Commission. I will be your moderator this evening. Sitting to my immediate left is Paul Parker, Deputy Director of the Transportation Commission, and even further to my left is Rima Griffith, the Executive Director of the Transportation Commission. Today we will be providing a presentation regarding the Tacoma Narrows Bridge toll rates for fiscal year 2016 and fiscal year 2017. As we go through the presentation, if you have any questions or comments, you can type them into the chat message box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. If you are on a tablet or a smartphone, you will need to press the chat icon and then type your text and submit. All questions and comments will be addressed at the conclusion of the presentation. Additionally, we will have a short survey at the completion of the presentation to hear our feedback on the webinar. Today's webinar will be recorded and posted to our website for future viewing. Now, before we get started in the presentation, I would like to introduce the Commission Chairman, Ann Haley. She serves as the lead commissioner regarding tolling matters and has a brief message for you all.
Thank you, Noah. Welcome.
Go ahead,
and
Ann.
Thank you, Noah. Welcome, and thank you for taking the time to participate in this webinar on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge toll rate increase. We hope you will find the presentation informative and will address your questions about the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Today, we have the Assistant Secretary from the Washington State Department of Transportation's Toll Division, Craig Stone, to discuss tolling in Washington State, and then a brief presentation on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge from our senior financial analyst, Noah Crocker. But before we move into this presentation, I want to take a moment and introduce the other transportation commissioners who are participating in this virtual platform. Today we have Commissioner Tortorelli, Commissioner Reveland, Commissioner Litt, and Commissioner Jennings, all virtually connected with participating in this meeting. Tonight, there will be no action taken. This is an opportunity to provide information regarding the Tacoma Narrows Bridge toll rate increase and its upcoming adjustments. Once again, I want to thank you for your time tonight. At this time, we will begin the presentation starting with our first presenter, Assistant Secretary and Director of the Toll Division, Craig Stone. Mr. Stone?
Thank you, Commissioner Haley. It's good to be here tonight, and what we're going to do is give you some background regarding this proposal by the Transportation Commission to look at toll rate change for Tacoma Narrows Bridge. So tonight we want to give you an overview of statewide tolling, roles and responsibilities between the legislature, the Commission, and the Department of Transportation. And we want to look at the future debt service payments that are required that are financing the bridge. And then from there, the Transportation Commission will continue the presentation to talk about the actual toll rate proposal that is before them. So looking at Washington State, we began tolling here with Tacoma Narrows Bridge in 2007. It had been a generation since we had tolls in the state. A number of our bridges across the Sound and across rivers in the past have been built with tolls. But Tacoma Narrows Bridge is really the part of the new generation that's brought tolls back to the state of Washington as a financing tool. We also then, in 2008, brought on the 167 Hotline pilot project between Renton and Kent. And then in 2011, we began tolling the State Route 520 bridge. The legislature has also authorized tolling of the north half of Interstate 405 as express toll lanes that will open up this fall between Bellevue and Linwood. And they've also authorized tolling on the SR 99 tunnel that's replacing the Alaskan Way Viaduct. The other facilities you see on here are studies that were looking at the concept of taking the HOV lanes and turning them also into express toll lanes. And also, as we speak, the legislature is considering investments into 167 in Pierce County and State Route 509 near SeaTac as additional facilities that possibly could have tolls into the future. Looking at the roles and responsibilities, the legislature in 2008 passed what they call a policy bill and identified that the legislature is the body that actually passes specific bills to establish tolling on a designated toll facility and what the use of those toll revenues can be used for. The Transportation Commission was then given the toll rate setting responsibility and setting which rates and fees, and that is partly why we're here tonight, is they consider that. The Department of Transportation, we plan, analyze, and construct these facilities as well as we operate them. And then we also work with the Office of the State Treasurer, who does all the financial work for the state of Washington, and they are the ones who actually will issue the debt out to the bond market. Looking at the Good to Go programs, the statewide, last year, looking at about 36 million toll transactions occurred. We're running around 500,000 active Good to Go accounts at this point in time. And the gross toll revenue that was brought in from those transactions was around 126 million. Looking specifically at the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, about 41,000 toll transactions occur. Again, it's only collected in one direction. On an annual basis, that turns out to be 14 million transactions that generate 63 million in revenue. Then of those that pay the Good to Go, those that pay the tolls, the Good to Go accounts represent about 70%. The toll booths represent about 24% of the trips, and the pay-by-mail process, where we'll look up your license plate and send you a bill in the mail, represent about 6%. Each of these has a toll rate associated with that, and that's part of the discussion tonight with the Commission. The background on Tacoma Narrows Bridge, this is actually the new bridge, is the third bridge across the Narrows. Each one of them has been tolled. In 1998, there was a vote of the public that recommended to the Secretary of Transportation to move forward with the construction of the new bridge. That construction began in 2002, and with that, there was a finance plan associated that allowed then for bond financing to be repaid using tolls. Tolling then began in July of 2007, and with that, the debt service for those bonds did require regular toll increases. So looking at this slide, this is the current debt service schedule. We started out, if you look at this, it says FY08. That would have been actually in July of 2007. That's the beginning of our fiscal year for 08. And you can see each year there has been a change in how much debt service is required to pay the bonds that were sold. Our current year, you can see where we are, and we are anticipating a 16% increase in what is required for the following year for debt payment. Down on the black line is the 2002 planned toll rate. So the intent was for the first 2 years to have a $3 toll. Then the next 3 years we have a $4 toll, go to then a $5 toll, and then ultimately to a $6 toll. Because of the bonds that were sold were a little bit lower in interest rates than the original plan, the construction of the project also came in a little bit below the estimate. We've been also able to keep the Good to Go rates below the $3, $4, $5, and $6 rates with that. You also can see here that there is a payment for sales tax deferral. So on construction projects, we do pay sales tax, and at this point in time, sales tax will be required in fiscal year 2019. And with that, I'll turn that back to Noah Crocker.
Thank you, Craig. For the record, my name is Noah Crocker, and I am the Senior Financial Analyst for the Commission. For this next portion of the presentation, we'll be covering the information here on Slide 8. We'll briefly discuss what's required by law and the driving factors for the need for toll rate increases. We'll review the current financial plan, which helps to illustrate the need for toll rate increases. We'll spend some time discussing debt service, as that is the primary driver for rate increases. Then we'll briefly review the historical traffic volumes and rates on the bridge. Lastly, we'll go into the proposal itself, which starts with the recommendation of the Citizens Advisory Committee, then the review of the proposal, and then lastly covering the Commission's consideration for their toll rate adjustment. RCW 4746-100 states that toll charges must be imposed in amounts sufficient to provide annual revenue to meet expenses, make our debt service payments, and repay the motor vehicle fund if we borrow from it. The key being that we need to set toll rates at a level to generate annual revenue sufficient to meet our financial obligations. We receive many questions asking us, why are we increasing toll rates again? Why do tolls need to be increased? Well, the driving factor for our expenses is debt service. As Craig briefly described, to fund the construction of the bridge, bonds were sold. These bonds were sold with escalating debt service repayment schedule. For example, debt service in fiscal year 2015 is approximately $53 million. Those payments will increase to $61 million in 2016, and again another increase in 2017 to $70 million. As a percentage of the total expenses, debt service starts at 80% and increases to roughly 85% of our expenses. It is important also to communicate and acknowledge the efforts that have been done to reduce debt service payments. The Office of the State Treasurer has refinanced all the bonds that could be refinanced and have saved $9.5 million over the life of the debt. And we'll have more to come on debt service in the coming slides. On slide 11, we have provided a bar graph representing the current financial plan at today's toll rates, forecasted to 2030. This plan focuses on total revenues, represented by the green bars, and total expenses, represented by the red bars. What you'll observe is that the expenses, or red bars, are growing at a faster pace than the green bars, our revenues. Essentially, this graph demonstrates that at today's current toll rates, expenses are greater than our incoming revenues. Essentially, this graph demonstrates that current toll rates are not sufficient. And starting for fiscal year 16, which is July 1st of 2015, expenses are significantly higher than our revenues and will continue to remain so through fiscal year 2030. Again, toll rates will not produce revenue sufficient to meet our anticipated expenses. Again, why are expenses increasing so drastically? 12th slide here illustrates the driver is debt service, which is represented by the red bars. To fund the construction of the bridge, 10 different bonds were issued. 8 of those 10 bonds were zero coupon bonds, and the other 2 were current interest bonds. You'll observe that the debt service increases by approximately $8.27 million from our current fiscal year till our next one. Debt service will then continue to increase by another large jump of $9.16 million from 2016 to 2017. On a positive note, after 2017, debt service levels off for a few years with marginal increases until another large jump in fiscal year 2022. I want to mention that due to the financing structure and the types of the bonds that were issued, those bonds that could be refinanced have been refinanced. And again, we've saved a total of $9.5 million over the life of this debt. So this debt service schedule is essentially fixed and is expected to require more increases in the future. It's also important to note on this graph the deferred sales tax repayments, which begin in fiscal year 2019. The deferred sales tax are represented by the green bars on top of the red. Again, the deferred sales tax will not impact this toll rate proposal, but as we look down the line, that will impact the next biennial toll rate adjustments. On slide 13, we show a table with reported traffic volumes from 2008 through 2014. Again, what you'll observe over this period of time is that traffic is relatively unchanged. The volume is hovering right around 14 million trips per year. This is true even in the years in which toll rates changed, including 2009, 2013, 14, and this current year, 2015. Now, currently, the year-to-date volumes of traffic are showing modest signs of year-over-year growth, and we are hopeful that as the economy stabilizes, this growth will continue. Slide 14 is a little redundant of slide 7, but again, we want to highlight a few things. We want to highlight that the original 2002 toll rate plan and the financial plan assumed and expected toll rates to increase to $6 by 2016. We also wanted to highlight that on this slide, year-to-date tolls have been kept below the planned level. As we move out further into the debt service curve, as we previously talked about, toll rates will need to be increased to match the expenses. But the key message is that the implemented toll rates on a weighted average basis have been below the assumed toll rate financial plan at its inception. Again, we feel this is another positive measurement of our toll rate setting on Tacoma Narrows Bridge. Another question we are routinely asked about is possibly developing a commuter discount program. Slide 15 is meant to try and address those comments. In essence, the Good to Go account program serves as our commuter discount program. If you have a Good to Go sticker and an account, you are assured you are paying the lowest rate. Most commuters have a Good to Go account, thus they are representative of our commuter base and receiving the discount. When we look at the toll booths, customers paying at the toll booth or the cash rate pay a slight premium of $1 above the Good to Go rate. The premium is paid and meant to cover the higher cost of collection when compared to the Good to Go program, but also provides an incentive for folks to switch to the Good to Go program. When we look at the pay by mail rate, which is the highest toll rate, these users pay a $2 premium above the Good to Go rate. Again, this larger premium is to cover higher costs of servicing these customers and also incentivize them to switch to a more cost-efficient method of payment like the toll booth or a Good to Go account. So thus far through the presentation, we've talked about the history of the bridge and covered the drivers of expenses and why toll rate increases are necessary. Next, we'll discuss the actual toll rate proposal. All the information that is being shared tonight has been covered with the Citizens Advisory Committee, which in turn works with the Washington State Department of Transportation to evaluate and develop a toll rate proposal to bring before the Commission. The Citizens Advisory Committee is made up of a 9-member Citizens, the CAC is made up of a 9-member Citizens Advisory Committee appointed by the Governor to provide rate recommendations to the Commission. The CAC is composed of permanent residents of the bridge area, and the CAC generally has approached its work in 3 steps. Understand the financial plan, reviewing traffic and revenue forecasts, and voting to recommend proposed toll rates. Typically, the CAC is convened in the fall prior to the year in which rates are to be adjusted. The CAC holds several meetings reviewing detailed information on finance and operations and works towards arriving at a rate recommendation. This year, the CAC made the recommendation of a 50-cent increase starting July 1st, 2015 for fiscal year 16, an additional 50-cent increase July 1st, 2016 for fiscal year 2017. And this is subject to an annual review. The CAC, at the urging of the Commission, has put forth a 2-year recommendation. The Commission prefers to take a longer view than a 1 year to provide more predictability to toll payers and to allow everyone a chance to prepare and plan for known increases coming. Again, as we look back at the debt service graphs, we know toll rates were intended to increase over time until toll revenue reaches a stabilized level with expenses. Pardon me. Now, once the Commission receives the toll rate proposal from the CAC, we begin our process to review and evaluate the proposal. The Commission uses a fund balance test to first determine if the current toll rates are sufficient. If the current toll rates fail the test, then the Commission moves forward and evaluates whether the proposal by the CAC will pass the test. The Commission also can begin reviewing other scenarios that they are interested in at that time. The Commission over the last few years have in its review process added traffic sensitivity analysis to all scenarios being considered. And we'll discuss more about the traffic sensitivity scenarios in a few more slides. But what is the fund balance test? The Commission policy states that the Tacoma Narrows Bridge fund balance shall not be less than 12.5% of annual expenses. This is the equivalent of 45 days of working capital. This value is then measured on a retrospective 3-month rolling average. In other words, the TB account shall maintain a minimum balance in the account that provides for 45 days of expenses. The sufficient minimum balance, or SMB, is in place to cover revenue shortfalls due to reductions in traffic volumes, help to manage cash flows, and cover legitimate cost increases. It is important to note that all revenues from the Tacoma Narrows Bridge can only be spent on the Tacoma Narrows Bridge. As I stated on the prior slide, the Commission first evaluates the current toll rates, utilizing forecasts available, and determine whether the current toll rates can meet the SMB test. Again, if you refer back to slide 11 and observe that expenses are significantly higher than revenues starting July 1st, 2015, again due to debt service, it was anticipated that the current toll rates wouldn't meet the test. And in fact, upon review, the current toll rates failed to meet the test. So next, the Commission evaluated the CAC's toll rate proposal, a 50-cent increase as of July 1st, 2015, and an additional 50-cent increase July 1st, 2016. This scenario appears to pass the test. The Commission then conducts traffic sensitivity analysis to the scenario to determine the level of revenue risk. Slide 19 graphically illustrates the fund balance test for fiscal years 16 and fiscal year 17. This graph is reflecting the CAC proposal and the traffic sensitivity analysis conducted by the Commission. Please allow me a moment to describe the information being communicated in this chart. First, the monthly expenses are being illustrated by the bars and columns at the bottom of the graph. The sufficient minimum balance threshold value is illustrated by the red dot running across the graph. The fund balance test for the CAC proposal is illustrated by the purple line. And lastly, the fund balance test for the CAC proposal, factor in traffic sensitivity analysis, is illustrated by the blue line. So here's the key takeaways from this graph. If the traffic forecast holds true for the scenario of a 50-cent increase and 50-cent increase, then it would appear to pass the test for both years and is acceptable. If traffic remains at a flat level of approximately 14 million trips, then the proposal would fail to meet the test in May of 2016, and then again fail to meet the test for most of 2017. The bottom of the curve serves as a measure of risk if traffic doesn't grow, but rather remains at current volumes, given the proposed toll rate increase. Now, we did not evaluate a scenario in which traffic declines for the given scenarios because we know it would fail to meet the test. At the March 18th Commission meeting, the Commissioners reviewed this information and discussed the risks. They ultimately agreed to accept the recommendation of the CAC proposal with the caveat of conducting the annual review. And this leads me to the next slide. Slide 20 illustrates the full toll rate proposal put forth by the Commission. This proposal is to increase two-axle toll rates uniformly by 50 cents starting July 1st, 2015, and again July 1st, 2016. This means that the good-to-go two-axle rate will increase to $5, the toll booth or cash rates will increase to $6, and the pay-by-mail rates will increase to $7 for 2016. Then for 2017, all rates will increase another 50 cents, with good-to-go going to $5.50, cash and toll booths going to $6.50, and pay-by-mail going to $7.50. Again, there will be a review of these toll rates this fall to determine whether these rates are sufficient. The next slide shows our meeting schedule for this proposal. Tonight, we're conducting the first of our 3 meetings. The next meeting will be held at Gig Harbor City Hall on April 22nd from 6 to 8 p.m. And the last and final hearing where action will be taken will be on May 20th at the Gig Harbor City Hall. That concludes the information and presentation portion of this meeting. But before we move into the question and answer portion, I would ask that our audience members take a quick survey to help us understand better if you prefer the webinar format. So give me 1 second to queue that up. So please take a minute or two to fill out the survey as far as how you feel about the webinar. To finish up the survey. And we'll finish the survey now. Thank you for helping us with that. And with that, we can move on to the next portion, which is our question and answers. Craig, can you still hear me there? Do we still have audio?
Yep, still here.
Good, thank you. Okay. Look, we have a few questions. Here's a question for you, Craig. When the bridge was initially being discussed, I thought there was a $6 maximum on all tolls.
And I believe that is the conversation that did indeed happen. The plan did call out for a $6 maximum toll, and so as I mentioned in the earlier slides, the intent was to start lower at $3 and then step it up to the $6 rate. I think in 2002 there was not a realization that there would be a difference of tolls between the good to go being the lowest toll that would be lower than the toll booth, which is also lower than the pay by mail. So there's some new stratification that's there. But as I noted, that $6 has been we've been below those stair-step rates for the good to go, which is about 70% of the users. And the infrequent users, those that would use the toll booths or pay by mail, are paying higher prices than that.
Here's a question that I can answer. This is there's a question about the bridge never being paid off. So the current plan is for the tolls to be removed once the bonds have been paid off, and the current schedule is for fiscal year 2030. Craig, we have a question. A listener wants to know: wasn't the bridge originally paid for with tax money?
So the bridge history, there was a little bit of tax money that was applied from the legislature. It was initially going to be what we call a public-private initiative using private resources. That was changed over to be publicly financed. And the state treasurer, as Noah mentioned, sold 10 bonds that were publicly issued. And then tolls are being used to then pay those bonds back off. That is for the bridge. The additional work on Highway 16 all the way over to I-5 is being paid through a gas tax of that nature, but the bridge itself is being funded almost completely by toll users.
We have a suggestion of why not default on the bonds. From a financial perspective, that is not a good alternative for the state to go down. You never want to fault on your debt as it impacts your other debts, and the state is issuing billions of dollars of bonds a year for capital projects, for education, for transportation. So defaulting on debt is not an option. Sorry, these are some long questions I'm trying to read through here. Craig, here's a question for you. Referring to slide 19, all required costs that need to be covered through toll collection, and then we have a question about 12.5%, the sufficient minimum balance.
So the intent of slide 19, as Noah presented, is to show what the debt service, as well as what we call the operations and maintenance, that's the O&M costs, are on a monthly basis. Within the red line is being the target within the forecasts. The 12.5 to see, where's the question? The added 12.5% comes in that sufficient minimum balance, which is the Commission's policy to make sure that there is enough, you might say, in a savings account to make sure that unforeseen situations happen. There is ability to address them before the Commission can get back to toll rate setting. That money stays for Tacoma Narrows Bridge and will ultimately be invested into the payment of the debt in the later years.
Thanks, Craig. We had another question early on that I missed. I want to go back to. It says there was a question on how much is being spent on collecting and accounting for money on the Narrows Bridge.
So if you look at from a percentage standpoint, it's 12.5% to collect the tolls on Tacoma Narrows Bridge, even with State Route 520. It's also very comparable to national peer toll agencies. If you look at it from a dollars and cents standpoint, for every good to go transaction, it costs us about 33 cents to collect that. So right now, looking at $4.50, 33 cents of that would then be for the collection costs. Toll booths are more expensive because they're more labor intensive. There's less traffic that goes through them. They run about $1.07 to collect a toll. And the pay by mail, where you drive through, we look up your license plate through the Department of Licensing information. We have postage envelopes and mail those out to you, and then you mail back your payments like utility bill. Those cost about $1.23. But in composite together, we're running about 12.5% for the cost to collect.
Craig, I'm asking Rima Griffith. There's a few questions that all are kind of centered on the 12.5% sufficient minimum balance and its legality, and so I was just going to ask her to make a few comments on that.
Sure. The Commission has legal authority to set rates sufficient to meet costs specified in law, which relate to debt service, operations, maintenance, and the financing of the structure. Part of those are very broad categories, and it is fully within the authority to also carry a balance within the Tacoma Narrows account to ensure there are funds sufficient to cover all those costs should there be a service disruption. So it is not collecting extra money. All that money is staying in the Tacoma Narrows Bridge account and will be used to pay off the debt eventually if that surplus remains. But for now, it's there to provide protection to the toll payers and to the state should there be any shortfalls of revenue.
Thank you. Craig, we have another question about the volume of vehicles crossing the bridge. I think there's more than 41,000. Is that correct?
Yeah, when you think about it, we're talking about toll transactions, so that is only the transactions in the eastbound directly 1,000. That's about half of what the total we call average daily traffic would be. So you're correct. As far as daily crossings of vehicles, you're probably around the 82,000 range.
And then we have another question that with rates going up, we expect more people to avoid the bridge. Isn't that going to be a problem for us from a revenue standpoint? I made a few comments during the presentation that even in years where we had rate increases, we didn't see the drop-off that we expected. Again, they're relatively flat, right around that 14 million range, and we are seeing growth this year, which is interesting since we did have a toll rate increase the last 2 fiscal years. So we're hoping with the economy stabilizing that we will see more trip growth. We've actually come through and addressed all the questions and comments. We can wait a few more minutes here and let a few more comments come in. There was a question regarding, here, let me mute this so I can see this, slide 19, the sufficient minimum balance. And the question was, are we funding 12.5% more each year as a cost? And that is not correct. The sufficient minimum balance, 12.5%, reflects the actual funds in the account. It is not an ongoing or annual expense that we continually refund. Once there is sufficient funds in the account, it maintains in the account and carries forward. So I hope I addressed that question. So we've got another question on a commuter rate or a daily rate for those that in the Gig Harbor community that cross the bridge on a daily basis? Could we instead look at having to, why are we looking to pay for it every time we cross the bridge? Could there be a different way of going about it? At this time, as I said before, the good-to-go rate is truly the discounted rate for this facility. It's the lowest toll rate available and offered, and we consider that the commuter-based rate. We have a question on, it sounds like the decisions are been made. What is the point of this meeting? So this meeting is to put forth information regarding the Tacoma Narrows Bridge and the toll rate proposal that was put forth by the CAC and approved by, not approved, but the proposal was moved forward by the Commission. So the purpose of this meeting is to gather public input and feedback on the proposal. We had a comment from Commissioner Roy James who says we have not made a public input. We had a question on, is the bridge being paid off or is it just the debt? I'm not sure I understand the distinction of the question, but as we said, we are making debt service payments, and again, the bonds were originally issued to finance the construction of the bridge, so you are, in essence, paying for the bridge and paying off the debt as you are going.
So it's like a home mortgage in a lot of ways. You pay for your home and then you have interest that you have to pay on top of that to pay it off over time.
There was a suggestion that visitors should pay more than visitors, or more than residents, excuse me. And I believe the way we think we capture non-residents or visitors or the tourists are through the options of paying at the toll booth and options of paying through the mail. And both those payment options do have higher toll rates than the good-to-go or the commuter discounted rate. How much is still owed? I'll have to get back on the question of how much debt is still outstanding. I don't know, Craig, do you have an idea on that figure? I know we got about 15 years left.
Yeah, I was going to say you could go to slide 7 and look at it from that standpoint. I don't have right in front of me here a summary of that, but you're right. We're about 8 years in. We have about 15 years left for payment. Recognizing that traffic will increase as population increases and employment increases. There are factors such as tolling which may dampen that, but we're actually seeing here in 2015 about a 2% increase in traffic, and that's getting us back after kind of the recession into more what we would expect to happen. So in the 15 years to come, we are anticipating that the region as a whole, including the travel shed for Tacoma Narrows Bridge, will increase on a moderate rate, and that will also assist in this debt payment.
Craig, there's another question on the cost of the bridge, and the question is, how did the bridge end up costing over $1 billion?
I want to be clear, it did not cost over $1 billion. I was just, I can probably get back to you on that one, looking for what the actual final construction cost was. It was in the range of $750 to $800 million. I would, like I said, I don't have it right here, and I'll take a look if I can find it quickly. So the cost actually came in a little bit under the bid price from the contractor, so that was good news. The costs going over to I-5, so the whole HOV lanes, the Nally Valley, things of that nature, as I mentioned earlier, are being funded through the gas tax and being funded in that direction.
There's a question on revenues and expenses, and I just want to point out that this current graph represents the toll rate increase. So this is revenues and incomes after the toll rate increase. We evaluated a non-toll rate increase, and the count went negative starting at the beginning of fiscal year 2017 and failed to meet the test midway through fiscal year 2016. So this chart does not reflect a non-toll rate increase. This revenue chart reflects the toll rate increase with the sufficient minimum balance test being met with the increase. A non-toll rate increase does not meet the test, and the account goes negative in fiscal year 2017.
And in addition, I'll add that at the end of the fiscal year in June is a very small payment, so you temporarily have a large balance in the account, but then you have a larger payment in July, so that larger balance is drained down very quickly at the very beginning of the fiscal year.
Good point.
So, Noah, I was able to find it was $792 million was the capital cost for the project and the program. You had to think about, similar to your house or a mortgage that you might have, what that initial cost is. How it was paid is the construction cost, and then you have financing cost on top of that. And so when you're looking at the total debt payments, you're talking about not only paying the principal, but the interest out to 2030. So those two numbers will not be the same as if you bought a home for, say, $100,000, and then your over time, your interest rates included in that would be higher than that.
Craig, there's a question here on why not have time of day pricing and a difference similar to 520?
Good question. The principle behind time of day pricing, or even pricing for the 167 hot lanes or the upcoming 405 express toll lanes, is to help manage traffic, where you're using toll rate or the price as a signal to drivers to maybe move to shoulder hours rather than driving during the peak, so we can get the most utilization of the lanes. With the number of lanes that were built at Tacoma Narrows Bridge, as many know, the congestion really went away. Some people saved 30 to 45 minutes in their commutes. There's plenty of capacity on Tacoma Narrows Bridge, so we don't have to have the variable rates to fluctuate up and down to help us manage traffic.
We got an interesting comment from Sandra Carlson, with which we can sympathize with. The feeling of being held hostage, the Kitsap Peninsula, and beyond bear a very real burden. Residents should be allowed to buy bundles of reduced tolls to reduce their burden. I don't suppose, Ann, if you have any thoughts on that. I'm just kind of throwing it out there. I don't really have a response. I don't know if you would care to comment on that. I know in past toll team conversations, we wanted to keep toll rate pricing simple. We did not want to follow a more complex pricing model, such as the ferry system, where they do this bundling of tolls. It's harder to track, it's harder to communicate. So there was a desire to keep toll pricing simple and understandable. Oh, is she?
I think we are all very sympathetic with the burden that the toll increases place on Kitsap residents. I think the initial finance plan anticipated that the traffic would be much higher and those increases would be spread across many more drivers. That has not occurred as planned. But we also are very serious and sincere in our desire to ensure that the state of Washington meets its debt obligations to the bondholders for this bridge. So we're having to increase these tolls, but keeping them to as low a raise as we can, but still meet the state's obligations.
I'm going to come to another question. The legislature is considering deferring the deferred sales tax from 2018 to 2031. Will this have any effect on future debt service projections or the current toll rate proposal? So the two comments. Deferred sales tax is not impacting this current toll rate proposal. The deferred sales tax repayments begin in fiscal year 2019. And so that would be in the next biennial toll rate cycle that those payments will come into the financial plan, and that we'll have to worry about those payments to fund them. So if the legislature is successful in deferring the sales tax even further out from 2019, it won't impact the current proposal, but it will impact future proposals and help keep future proposals toll rates lower. The deferred sales tax amounts to about $5.6 million per year in additional loan repayments. So it is significant and would be very helpful and impactful, just not this toll rate setting cycle. It would be the next toll rate setting cycle where we would receive that relief. So there were 10 different, the question is, what is the interest rate on the bonds for this bridge? Again, there were 10 different bond sales, so I don't have the 10 different bond interest rates off the top of my head, but I think the weighted average sales is somewhere around 4.5% to 5%. But to that specific audience member, if you want the exact interest rates for those 10 different bond sales, please follow up after this meeting and I can email those to you. I don't see anything. So there was a follow-up question to the bonds about why we can't refinance them. So again, there was 10 different bond sales, 8 of these bonds were sold as debt instruments called zero coupon bonds. And zero coupon bonds, they're useful in certain circumstances. And so for the Tacoma Narrows Bridge, they were useful because they did not require payments during the construction period, the 5-year construction period. Current interest bonds requires semi-annual interest payments as the bonds are paid out. Zero coupon bonds are sold at a deep discount and are paid at full face value at maturity. So that the 8 bonds that were zero coupon bonds really contributed heavily to the escalating debt service structure, and it is the reason we can't refinance 8 of those bond sales. Now, the 2 bond sales that were current interest bonds have been refinanced and again have saved roughly $9.5 million for the life of the debt, but we cannot refinance the zero coupon bonds because they do not have what we call a call feature, which would give us the option to refinance those bonds.
There's also a question here asking whether anyone on the commission actually pays a toll for crossing the bridge. And I will note that Commissioner O'Neill lives in the vicinity of the bridge, and when he travels to Seattle, he either will cross the bridge and pay the toll or take the ferry and pay the toll.
And I think we all do occasionally. Dan's our regular user, Commissioner O'Neill is, that we all, from time to time, of course, do cross the bridge for a variety of reasons and pay our tolls, and some of us pay cash willingly and pay the higher toll.
I think that's it.
We'll give it a couple more minutes if there's any other questions that need to come in, and then we'll wrap up shortly. Well, seeing as there are no more questions or comments coming in, we'd like to conclude by reminding folks that we do have another meeting coming up. April 22nd, we'll be at Gig Harbor City Hall presenting information and taking public comments and questions. And again, the final hearing or rate action will be taken will be May 20th at Gig Harbor City Hall from 6 to 8 p.m. You can come and provide your comments at that time. At this time, I'd like to turn the mic over to our chairman, Ann Haley, for closing comments.
Thank you, Noah. We appreciate everyone who has attended this webinar tonight. We have been seeking a way for people to meet in a virtual manner rather than requiring people to go in person to a certain place at a certain time. We hope to continue these webinars, and if you have found it to be valuable to you, we hope that you will tell your friends and family, and we hope to see you again at another webinar from the Washington State Transportation Commission. We thank you very much for participating tonight, and good night.
Good night.